CEO mocked the single dad's backyard, until military engineers asked what he'd built inside. 41 people were standing in the backyard of 14 Callaway Drive when the laughter started. Not nervous laughter, not polite laughter, the kind that comes out of people who have decided, collectively, that something in front of them is beneath the effort of being taken seriously. The backyard belonged to a man named Levi Crane, 32 years old, single father, wore the same canvas jacket every day, regardless of the season, the left elbow worn through to a pale ring of thread. He worked maintenance at the Hargrove Municipal Water Treatment Facility, 5 days a week, 6:15 in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon. Sometimes later, when the filtration systems threw errors, nobody else knew how to read. The 41 people standing in his backyard were not there to see him. They were there because Nora Ashfield, CEO of Ashfield Infrastructure Holdings, had called a site inspection. And what she found at the back of that property, a low concrete structure, no windows, a hand-welded steel door, a weather vane made from copper pipe soldered at the joints, was, in her estimation, the least impressive thing she had seen in 11 months of acquiring distressed properties along the Callaway corridor. A shed, she said, not to Levi. To the man beside her, Marcus Doyle, Senior Acquisitions Director, silver-haired jacket, probably cost more than Levi's truck. He built a shed. Someone at the back of the group let out a short laugh, then another. Levi stood with his hands in his pockets. He did not look at his daughter, but his daughter looked at him. Her name was Rosie, 6 years old. She was holding a stuffed rabbit with one ear folded flat. The rabbit's name was Biscuit. She held Biscuit against her chest, and she watched her father's face, the way children watch a face when they are trying to understand something that nobody has explained to them yet. Levi said nothing. He did not argue. He did not explain. Stay with this one. What they were laughing at was not a shed. And what Levi Crane was not saying was the thing that would eventually end Marcus Doyle's career, change the course of a $43 million infrastructure contract, and bring 3 military engineers to a residential backyard in a town nobody outside the county had ever heard of. Press play. The answer is one none of them saw coming. Nora Ashfield had been CEO of Ashfield Infrastructure Holdings for 14 months, 31 years old, which meant she had been appointed to the role at 29, which meant that the board of directors had done so while simultaneously making clear that she would need to prove it. The company's 3 legacy partners, Werner Holt, Gerald Cross, and a man who went by B.D. Ashfield, her own uncle, had voted her in by a margin of 2 and watched her the way hawks watch a field mouse that has somehow found its way onto a fence post. She had spent 14 months proving she could hold the fence post. The Callaway Corridor acquisition was the largest project she had personally overseen. 11 parcels of land along a half-mile stretch of post-industrial residential street, most of them distressed, most of them occupied by people who had received letters from the company's legal team explaining the offer in terms that were technically accurate and emotionally empty. 9 of the 11 had signed. Levi Crane had not signed. Marcus Doyle had been the one to suggest the site visit. He had framed it as an opportunity to bring the team, show Crane the scope of what was happening around him, let the momentum do the persuasion. What Marcus Doyle did not say was that he had been personally managing Levi's case for 6 weeks. What Marcus Doyle did not say was that he had already drafted an alternate plan in the event Levi continued to refuse. Nora did not know any of that yet. What she knew was that 41 people were standing in this man's backyard on a Thursday afternoon, and the structure at the center of the property looked like something assembled over a long weekend with whatever was left over, after the real building was finished. "Mr. Crane," she said, and she turned to face him properly for the first time. "Walk me through what you've built here." Levi looked at her. He had quiet eyes, not the quiet of someone who has nothing to say, the quiet of someone who has learned that saying things does not change them. "It's a workshop," he said. Doyle made a sound beside her. Not quite a word, just enough of a sound to let the people nearest to him know that they were allowed to react. Rosie's grip on Biscuit tightened. She was standing just behind Levi's left leg. One of her sneakers was untied. Levi had not noticed yet. She had not told him. "A workshop," Nora repeated. She looked at the welded door. The copper weather vane, the poured concrete foundation that extended 4 inches past the structure's footprint on 3 sides. "Mr. Crane, we are prepared to make you a final offer on this property. The structure you've built here, I want to be honest with you, does not increase our valuation." "I know," Levi said. "Then you understand why continuing to decline our offer is not in your interest." Levi looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at Biscuit. Then he crouched down to Rosie's level and, without saying anything, retied her left sneaker. He stood back up. "I understand your offer," he said. "I'm not interested." Doyle stepped forward. He had a way of positioning himself slightly ahead of whoever he was speaking with, a half step that most people would not consciously register. "Mr. Crane." His voice was the kind of smooth that comes from repetition. "The 11 parcels on this corridor are going to be redeveloped regardless of your decision. The question is whether you are compensated fairly or whether you are simply surrounded. I'd encourage you to think about your daughter." Levi looked at him. "Not anger, not fear. Something older than both." "I think about my daughter," he said, "every day." He picked up Rosie's hand. He walked toward the back door of the house. He did not look back. The laughter that started then was quieter than the first round, but it was more certain of itself. Grace Fenwick had been Nora Ashfield's personal assistant for 7 years, which meant she had been Nora's assistant since before Nora was a CEO, since before the company had a glass elevator or a corporate communications department or a catering contract with the kind of firm that put edible flowers on the canapes. Grace was 53 years old. She had a habit of writing things in a small spiral notebook rather than a phone, and she had a habit of writing down things that were not her job to notice. She noticed Marcus Doyle. She had noticed him for 4 months, starting around the time the Callaway Corridor acquisition began in earnest. The way he returned calls from certain numbers before he returned calls from Nora. The way he occasionally left the office with a folder that was not on the shared server. The way he smiled at the mention of Levi Crane's name, not a warm smile, not a cold smile. The smile of someone who already knows the ending of a story. Grace wrote these things in her notebook. She did not act on them yet. 3 weeks before the site visit, she had run a title search on 14 Callaway Drive, not because anyone asked her to, but because she had been running title searches on all 11 parcels as part of the acquisition documentation, and Levi's parcel was the only one that had ever made her stop reading. The house had been purchased 8 years ago by a man named Levi Crane and a woman named Clara Crane, née Whitmore. The mortgage was paid off 4 years after purchase. The title was clean. No liens, no encumbrances, no disputes. Clara Crane had died 22 months ago. The cause was listed in the public record as a motor vehicle accident, southbound on Route 9. A Tuesday morning in March, Rosie had been 2 months old. Grace sat with that for a while. Then she closed the folder and put it in the bottom drawer of her desk and went back to work. She did not tell Nora, not yet. She was waiting for the thing she had not yet found. Levi had built the workshop himself over the course of 3 years. He had started pouring the foundation the spring after Clara died, in the weeks when Rosie was still small enough to sleep in a carrier strapped to his chest while he worked. He had done the electrical himself, running conduit through the walls in the evenings after Rosie was in bed. He had insulated it in November of the 2nd year, using recycled denim bat he had sourced from a salvage company in the next county. The steel door he had welded from plate he'd gotten from a decommissioned pumping station the facility had replaced. From the outside, it was, as Nora Ashfield had accurately assessed, an unremarkable structure. Inside was something different. There was a machining center. A refurbished one, CNC, 6-axis, the kind of equipment that belongs in a precision manufacturing facility, not in a residential property in a town of 11,000 people. There were 2 drafting tables, one of them covered in a hand-drawn set of technical drawings that were annotated in a handwriting so small and precise it looked like it had been printed. There was a rack of tools along the south wall, each one hanging on its own labeled peg, each one clean. In the corner, on a low wooden table, there was a child's drawing taped to the wall, a lopsided house, a big figure and a small figure, and the word Daddy printed in blue crayon. Beside it, on a shelf, was a sketchbook. Clara's name was written on the inside cover in her own handwriting. Levi had not opened it since the March she died, but he had not moved it either. He kept the workshop locked with a deadbolt he had machined himself. The tolerances on the cylinder were tighter than anything sold commercially. When the municipal engineers had come to inspect the property a year earlier, a routine survey for the corridor development assessment, one of them had spent 4 minutes trying to figure out what brand the lock was. He'd given up and written custom in his report. The machining center was the thing Elijah Marsh had given him. Elijah was 67 years old and had been the chief fabrication engineer at Hadron Defense Systems for 23 years before his retirement. He had known Levi for 9 years, ever since Levi had been the one to diagnose a pressure anomaly in the filtration system that served the industrial park where Elijah's shop was located. Most of the engineers who had looked at that system had assumed the problem was in the pump housing. Levi had spent 40 minutes reading the system's data logs and had pointed to a valve 3 sections upstream that had been installed with the wrong bore diameter 6 years earlier. Elijah had watched him work and said nothing. Then he had asked Levi where he had studied. Levi had said he hadn't, not formally. He'd read. What followed was 9 years of something that was not quite a mentorship, because Levi did not need a mentor in the way that word implies deficiency. It was more like a recognition. Elijah had seen something and had arranged things to give it room to grow. The machining center had been his retirement gift. He had rented a flatbed and delivered it himself. He had never told Levi what it was worth. He had never told anyone what Levi had been doing inside that workshop either. Not because he was asked to keep a secret, because it had not occurred to him that anyone would think to ask. At 6:45, on the morning after the site visit, Elijah drove his truck to the end of Callaway Drive and sat in it for a while. He had a thermos of coffee. He drank it slowly. He was looking at the workshop structure at the end of Levi's property, and he was thinking about something he had read in a trade publication 3 weeks earlier about the Hargrove Municipal Water Treatment Facility's planned infrastructure upgrade, a $43 million project to replace the city's aging pressure regulation network. The bid was due in 11 days. Elijah drove home. He wrote something in a letter on paper, folded it, and put it in an envelope. He addressed it to Nora Ashfield at Ashfield Infrastructure Holdings. He did not send it yet. He was waiting to see what Levi would do. What Levi did at 7:15 on the morning after the site visit was make pancakes. Rosie sat at the kitchen table with biscuit propped against the fruit bowl. The rabbit's flat ear flopped to one side. Rosie ate with the methodical focus of a child who has decided that breakfast is a serious project. Levi stood at the stove. He flipped the second round without looking. His mind was somewhere else. He was thinking about the bid. He had been working on the pressure regulation design for 14 months. The city's existing network had been installed in 1987 using a distributed valve architecture that made sense at the time, but was now creating pressure drop problems across the eastern residential zones. Problems that showed up as low water pressure complaints and, twice in the past 18 months, as pipe failures that required emergency repair. Levi had been reading the failure data every week. He had access to it because it came through the treatment facility's monitoring system, and it was his job to read it. What was not his job was to spend 14 months designing a replacement architecture in his workshop on nights and weekends. He had done it anyway. The design was not incremental. It did not propose replacing the old system component by component. It proposed a modular node architecture, 12 pressure regulation nodes distributed across the network, each one self-calibrating, each one capable of operating independently if the rest of the network failed. The redundancy it built in would reduce system-wide failure probability by an order of magnitude. The total cost, by his calculation, came in at $31 million against the city's $43 million budget. He had drawn every component by hand first. Then he had modeled it on the machining center. He had physical prototypes of 5 of the 12 nodes in varying stages of completion. He had never told anyone about the design, not because he was strategic, not because he was planning anything. He had not planned to submit a bid. The bid process had not been something he thought was for him. He had built the design because the problem was there, and the problem bothered him, and he could not leave problems alone. What changed was the letter. Not Elijah's letter, that one had not been sent yet. A different letter. From Ashfield Infrastructure Holdings' legal department. Delivered to his door the afternoon after the site visit. It outlined, in language that was technically polite, the company's intent to pursue an easement claim on the eastern boundary of his property if he continued to decline the acquisition offer. The easement would, in effect, allow construction to begin on the adjacent parcel in a way that would compromise the structural integrity of his workshop's foundation. Levi read the letter once. He set it on the kitchen table. Rosie had been drawing at the other end of the table, and she looked up at him and then looked at the letter and then looked back at him. "Is it bad?" she asked. He picked up the letter. He folded it. He put it in the drawer with Clara's sketchbook. "Not yet," he said. He went to the workshop. He sat down at the drafting table. He looked at the design for a long time. Not the emotion of it, the dimensions of it, the tolerances, the specifications, the kind of certainty that lives in a measurement that has been checked 20 times and is still correct. He pulled a fresh sheet of paper. He began writing. The bid window for the Hargrove Municipal Water Treatment Infrastructure upgrade had been open for 6 weeks. 11 firms had submitted preliminary expressions of interest. Of those, 6 had been invited to submit full proposals. Ashfield Infrastructure Holdings was one of the 6. They had submitted their proposal 4 days before the deadline. Marcus Doyle had overseen the submission personally. The proposal had been prepared by the company's internal engineering team and was, by Doyle's private estimation, the strongest bid in the field. He was almost certainly correct about that. What he did not know, what no one at Ashfield Infrastructure Holdings knew, was that on the morning of the bid deadline, the city's procurement office had received a 7th proposal. It had arrived by courier at 9:47 in the morning in a blue envelope, hand-addressed. The proposal itself was contained in 12 bound pages and 2 folded technical drawings and a thumb drive with 3-dimensional models. The procurement officer, a woman named Deborah Tillman who had processed infrastructure bids for 18 years, set the envelope on her desk and opened it slowly. She read the cover page. She read the executive summary. She turned to page 3, which was the system architecture overview, and she stopped. She read it again. Then she called the city's director of infrastructure, a man named Adrian Walsh, and she said, "You need to come look at something." Walsh arrived at 11:15. He read the proposal standing at Deborah's desk. He did not sit down. At 1 in the afternoon, he called a colleague at the Regional Engineering Standards body. He described the modular node architecture in broad terms and asked for an assessment of its feasibility. There was a pause on the line. "Where did you get this?" his colleague asked. "From a bid submission," Walsh said. Another pause. "Who submitted it?" Walsh looked at the cover page. He read the name. "A man named Levi Crane," he said. The call that came to Nora Ashfield's office at 3:47 on the afternoon of the bid deadline was from Adrian Walsh. She took it at her desk. Marcus Doyle was in the chair across from her, going over the contract terms for the Callaway acquisition. He stayed in the chair. He did not pretend not to listen. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Nora said very little on her end. She said, "I see." She said, "Thank you for letting me know." She said, "We'll be in touch." She set the phone down. She looked at Doyle. "The city has received a competing bid," she said, "for the infrastructure contract." Doyle's expression moved in a specific way, not surprise. Something that had been waiting behind surprise and had just decided it no longer needed to hide. "From whom?" he said. "A man named Levi Crane." The expression settled. "Crane," Doyle said. "Not a question. Something careful." Nora looked at him. She had known Marcus Doyle for 3 years. She had trusted his judgment on the Callaway corridor from the beginning. She was, at this moment, doing the arithmetic of that trust against the expression currently on his face. "You know him," she said. "He's a parcel holder," Doyle said. "A maintenance worker. He fixes pumps. He's not a licensed engineer." Nora looked at her desk. She thought about the backyard. The concrete foundation that extended 4 inches on 3 sides, the welded door, the copper weather vane at the peak of the structure that had, she realized only now, been oriented to the prevailing wind direction with a precision she had not given credit to in the moment. "Get me everything we have on the Crane property," she said, "and get me his full proposal." "He wouldn't have access to the city's system specifications," Doyle said. "Whatever he submitted, it won't be get it," she said. Doyle left. Grace, at her desk outside the office, watched him walk past. She opened her notebook to a page she had written on 6 weeks earlier. She read it. Then she picked up her phone and called a number she had been keeping on a slip of paper in the notebook's back cover. The number was for a man named Elijah Marsh. At 4:20 in the afternoon, Levi was in the workshop when he heard a car on the road. He set down the caliper he had been using. He walked to the door. He opened it. The car was a city vehicle. It had stopped at the end of the driveway. 2 men got out. Both wore hard hats with the city's infrastructure logo. One of them was carrying a copy of the 12-page proposal. "Mr. Crane?" the first man said. "Yes." "Adrian Walsh sent us. We have some questions about your bid submission." Levi looked at them. Then he stepped back from the door. He gestured for them to come in. The first man crossed the threshold and stopped. He stood in the workshop for 3 seconds without saying anything. The second man came in behind him and did the same thing. They were looking at the machining center. At the prototypes on the bench, 5 nodes in varying stages of completion, each one machined to a tolerance that you did not achieve without knowing exactly what you were doing. At the drawings on the table, 14 months of work spread across 2 surfaces, annotated in the small, precise handwriting that matched the handwriting in the proposal they were holding. The first man said, "You built these." "Yes." "All of them." "Yes." The man looked at his colleague. His colleague looked at the node prototype nearest to him on the bench. He reached out and picked it up. He turned it over. He put it down carefully, the way people put down things that are worth more than they look. "Mr. Crane?" The first man said, "Are you available to meet with Mr. Walsh tomorrow morning?" Levi thought about Rosie's schedule. "Pick up from Mrs. Hadley's at 2:30. "Yes," he said. "I can do that." The man nodded. He looked around the workshop one more time. His eye landed on the shelf in the corner. On the child's drawing. On Biscuit, who Rosie had left here by accident that morning, and who was sitting with his flat ear against the corner of a technical binder. He did not say anything else. He just nodded again, and the 2 men left. Levi stood alone in the workshop. He looked at Biscuit on the shelf. He looked at Clara's sketchbook beside it. "Okay," he said quietly. Not to anyone, just to the room. Nora Ashfield received the city's evaluation summary at 9:17 the following morning. She read it at her desk. Grace brought coffee and set it on the corner of the desk without speaking and went back to her own office. Nora did not touch the coffee. The summary was 14 pages. She read all of them. Then she read the attached comparison matrix, which set Ashfield Infrastructure Holdings' bid against the Crane submission across 19 evaluation criteria. In 12 of the 19, the Crane submission scored higher. In 4 of the remaining 7, the scores were equal. In 3, Ashfield scored higher. The 3 where Ashfield scored higher were corporate capacity, insurance coverage, and project management history. The 3 where you would expect a large established firm to beat a single individual working in a residential workshop. She set the summary down. She thought about the backyard, about Rosie's untied shoe, about the way Levi Crane had crouched down and retied it without saying anything, without announcing it, without making a performance of it. She thought about the way Marcus Doyle had smiled at the mention of Levi Crane's name. She called Grace. "I need to see the Crane acquisition file," she said. "The complete file, everything Doyle submitted." There was a brief pause. "I already pulled it," Grace said. "I've been holding it for 3 days." Nora set the phone down. She picked it up again. "Send it through," she said. The file took 40 minutes to read. At the end of it, Nora Ashfield sat very still. The file contained a legal opinion that Marcus Doyle had commissioned from an outside firm, not the company's regular counsel 6 weeks before the site visit. The opinion had been requested under Doyle's name, not under the company's. It assessed the validity of an easement claim against 14 Callaway Drive. It concluded that such a claim was technically viable, but would require fabricated documentation of a pre-existing access agreement. In the margin of the second page, in Marcus Doyle's handwriting, were 3 words: worth the risk. Nora stared at those 3 words for a long time. Then she picked up the phone and called the company's legal department. She told them to put Marcus Doyle's files under a hold order effective immediately. She told them not to alert him. Then she called Adrian Walsh. Then she drove to 14 Callaway Drive. It was 2:11 in the afternoon. Levi's truck was in the driveway. She knocked on the front door. He opened it. He looked at her. Behind him, just visible through the hallway, Rosie was sitting at the kitchen table. Biscuit was on the table beside her. "Miss Ashfield," Levi said. "Mr. Crane." She had her hands at her sides. No portfolio, no briefcase. Just herself in a gray coat on his front step. "May I come in?" He looked at her for a moment. Then he stepped back. She came in. She followed him to the kitchen. Rosie looked up. "Hi," Rosie said. "Hello," Nora said. Rosie looked at Nora for a moment with the thorough assessment of a 6-year-old. "Your coat is the same color as Biscuit's ear," Rosie said. Nora looked at the rabbit. The flat ear. It was, in fact, the same shade of gray as her coat. "It is," she said. She sat down across from Rosie without being asked. She put both hands on the table. She looked at Levi. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need to show you something." She placed the 2-page legal opinion on the table. She turned it so he could read it. He read it. He read it slowly, the way he read everything. He got to the margin note on page 2. He read those 3 words. He set the paper down. "Doyle," he said. "Yes." "Did you know?" "No." She said it without hesitation. "I did not know. I should have known sooner. That is not the same thing as knowing. But the failure belongs to me either way." Levi was quiet. He looked at the paper. He looked at Rosie. She was drawing something. She had not stopped drawing through the whole conversation, but her pencil had slowed. "The bid," Levi said. "The city's procurement team has placed your submission on a priority track. Adrian Walsh called me this morning. He wants to meet with you and his infrastructure team this week." She paused. "Your design, they've had 3 engineers look at it in the last 18 hours. They have questions, but they are good questions." Levi was quiet. "Marcus Doyle is being separated from the company effective today," she continued. "The documentation we have is being referred to the city's legal counsel. What happens after that is not in my control." "No," Levi said. "It isn't." She looked at her hands on the table. "The acquisition offer," she said. "I'm withdrawing it. The Callaway Corridor project will proceed around your parcel. It will cost us more. That's appropriate." Levi said nothing. "I'm also—" She stopped. She looked at the legal opinion on the table. She looked at the workshop visible through the back window. She looked at Rosie's drawing taking shape on the paper in front of her. A house, a tree, a figure with a flat-eared rabbit. "I'm sorry. Not for the company, not because of the bid. I'm sorry because I stood in your backyard and I laughed. And whatever I thought I knew about what I was looking at, I was wrong." Levi looked at her. "You weren't laughing," he said. "You were polite." "The distinction isn't as meaningful as I thought it was," she said. A silence settled in the kitchen. Outside, a car passed. The refrigerator hummed. Rosie set down her pencil. She looked up at Nora Ashfield. She held Biscuit's flat ear between 2 fingers. "My dad built the thing inside," Rosie said. "He built it for the water." Nora looked at her. "The water?" she said. "So, kids can have it," Rosie said. "He told me. He said the pipes are old and kids in the east part don't have good water sometimes. He said he was going to fix it." Nora Ashfield held very still. Levi was looking at his daughter, not with surprise, with the expression of a man hearing the truth stated plainly by someone too young to understand that most people dress it up before they say it. Rosie picked up her pencil again. She went back to drawing. Nora got up from her chair slowly. She came around the table to Rosie's side. She crouched down, not to Rosie's height in a performance of it, just lower, below the place she had been standing. She stayed there. She looked at the drawing, the house, the tree, the flat-eared rabbit. "What's his name?" she asked. Rosie looked at Biscuit. "Biscuit," she said. "That's a good name," Nora said. She stayed crouching for another moment. Then she straightened. She looked at Levi across the kitchen. "I'd like to propose something," she said. "Not an acquisition, something different, if you're willing to hear it." He looked at her. "I'll make coffee," he said. The proposal Nora laid out over the next 30 minutes was a joint implementation agreement. Ashfield Infrastructure Holdings would provide the corporate capacity, the project management infrastructure, and the insurance backing. The technical design, the modular node architecture, the pressure regulation system, the 12-node network would remain Levi's credited formally and protected under a licensing arrangement. The bid would be submitted jointly. The revenue split was negotiable. Levi listened. He asked 3 questions. 2 were technical, about timeline. 1 was about what happened to the credit on the design if the joint bid was rejected. Nora answered all 3. Then she put a 2-page term sheet on the table. "This is preliminary," she said. "Nothing here is final. I want your lawyer to look at it." Levi looked at the term sheet. He thought about Elijah, who had in fact been a licensed structural engineer before he became a fabrication engineer, and who had, twice in the past year, offered to look at anything legal that came through. "I'll have someone review it," he said. Nora nodded. "One more thing," she said. She had her coat on again, ready to leave. "Your proposal, the cover page." She paused. "There's no company name, no LLC, nothing, just your name and address." "Yes," he said. "The evaluation committee almost filed it as incomplete." "I know," he said. "I sent an email to Deborah Tillman the morning of submission, explaining the filing format." Nora looked at him. "You know Deborah Tillman's name," she said. "She's processed infrastructure bids for 18 years, he said. "She knows the system." Nora put on her coat. At the door, she turned. "Mr. Crane?" "Levi," he said. "Levi." She stood in the doorway. "For what it's worth, the evaluation summary, the 12 out of 19. Your design didn't just beat us, it made ours look like we weren't reading the same problem." He looked at her. "You weren't reading the water data," he said. "I was." She nodded. She left. Elijah Marsh drove over at 4:30. He had received a call from Grace Fenwick in the morning, which had been its own kind of surprise, and then a call from Levi in the afternoon, which had not. He brought the letter he had written and never sent, because he thought it might be useful, and because he had a mild habit of wanting credit for things, even when the credit had not been necessary. Levi read the letter and handed it back to him. "You were going to tell her," Levi said. "I was considering it." "Why didn't you?" Elijah thought about it. "Because you hadn't asked me to," he said. Levi made tea. They sat at the kitchen table. Rosie had gone to watch something in the living room. Biscuit was with her, propped on the arm of the couch, one flat ear visible from the kitchen doorway. Elijah read the term sheet. He read it twice. He asked for a pen. He wrote 3 notes in the margin, small and precise. "The licensing provision in Clause 4, he said. "Make them define the scope of derivative works before you sign anything." "Yes," Levi said. "And the credit on the design you wanted in the bid document, not just the contract. Public record." "Yes." Elijah set the pen down. He looked at the workshop through the back window. He could see the steel door from here, the copper weather vane catching the last of the afternoon light. "The military engineers," he said. Levi looked at him. "The ones who called me last week," Elijah said. "I told you someone would eventually look at the pressure regulation work. The redundancy architecture. It's the same principle they've been trying to apply to field water systems for deployment environments. They've been trying to solve it for 3 years." "You told them about the design," Levi said. "I told them someone had solved it," Elijah said. "I didn't tell them who." He picked up his tea. "I figured I'd let you tell them." Levi was quiet. 3 engineers, Elijah said. "I believe they want to come see the workshop." Levi looked at the window, at the steel door, at the copper weather vane. "When?" he said. "Tuesday," Elijah said. 10 in the morning. Levi picked up the term sheet. He held it for a moment. He thought about the 41 people in his backyard. He thought about the laughter. He thought about Rosie's hand in his. He thought about Clara's sketchbook in the drawer. Not grief, not pride, something older than both. He set the term sheet down. Rosie, he called. She appeared in the doorway, biscuit hanging from one arm. I need to make dinner, he said. You want pancakes or eggs? She considered this with her full attention. Pancakes, she said. And can Biscuit have a small one? Biscuit doesn't eat. He could start. Elijah made a sound into his tea that was close to a laugh. Levi got up. He went to the stove. He got the bowl from the cabinet, the flour, the milk. He set them on the counter. He looked out the window at the workshop, at the copper weather vane turning slowly in the early evening wind, catching the last of the light before it went. He opened the flour. He began.